Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, and I am the host of, and this is your Sunday Night BattleCry. So glad to be with you guys, because that means I'm home, and so I love you guys, but I love being home even more than I love you guys. You might see Doc wandering around the background. Let's see, come here, Doc. Come here, buddy. Oh, here. This is real life in the Meckler household. Get your ball. Go off to everybody. See if he'll perform. By the way, it's getting a little hard to lift him into my lap. This is Doc. You guys might remember him. It seems like just a few weeks ago when I got him. He's now 18 weeks. Got him when he was 12 weeks. And he is now pushing 70 pounds. I'm not going to be able to put him in my lap much longer. He can't sit in my lap anymore. You can see Winston in the background. So if you hear a little bit of chaos, you know what that chaos is. By the way, I was out on the road and somebody said to me, hey, I love seeing the dogs. I love knowing what's going on in the house. When I got involved in politics, I started doing video stuff like this and doing interviews and whatever. I never wanted this to be anything other than what it is. I mean, I think the office looks beautiful, but this is my real office. It's not a set. And dogs come in and out, and Patty comes in and out. And if the kids were here, you might hear my granddaughter, Lorelei, in the background. It's just real life here in the Meckler household. You might even hear Doc tearing up some paper over there on the floor. It's just real life here. And I always wanted to be just real with you guys and let you know what it's really like. It's not perfect. It's not fancy. I don't always speak perfectly. The dogs are not always quiet when I'm here working in the office, but you guys get to look in and see the real things. And so I just want you to know we don't edit. There's no rehearsal going on here. This is just riffing off the cuff, dogs going in and out, whatever happens, happens. So I make no promises it's going to be great or perfect, but I will promise you, you're always going to get the real deal. So we always do a call to action, and this week's call to action is really important to me, and there's some news that was made this week that I'll tie it into, but my call to action is don't just believe the news. I mean, even when it's the news that comes from, quote unquote, your side or somebody that you like and trust, even when it comes from me, don't just trust the news. Be a reasonable skeptic. And I put the word reasonable in there because I don't want you to be overly skeptical of everything all the time. That's kind of how you fall down the conspiracy rabbit hole. And there are a lot of conspiracies that have proven to be true. But the reality is not all of them. And you shouldn't be that skeptical that you don't ever believe anything ever. You should always question. You should be rational. Use your facilities of thought and reason and wisdom and discernment so that you could try to figure out, is that true? Is it not true? Sometimes things just ring as untrue, and you should always check them out. Sometimes I see news pop up on X, and that feed is going all day long, and I look at it and I think, I'm not going to repost that because it doesn't make sense. I'm just not sure about that. Or it's so radical, I don't want to just jump in, with the bloodlust for the red meat because something pops up and it looks outrageous and unbelievable. A lot of times if it looks outrageous and unbelievable, well, it is outrageous and unbelievable. You should believe it and you should check. And so I check a lot of stuff like that. That might mean that I'm not first or fifth or 50th on the story because I want to make sure I get it right. I'd rather get it right than be first. That's just kind of my approach to things. And I encourage you to take the same approach. We don't want to spread stuff to our friends, to our family, on X, Facebook, wherever, if it's not true. And if we haven't spent a little bit of time verifying that. When somebody says, like, how do you know that? You don't want to just say, oh, well, I saw it posted on the internet. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So be a skeptic. So there was a story that came out this week that ties into this really well, I think. And this is the Epstein files story, right? So we heard Pam Bondi say that the Epstein files have been on her desk for a couple of weeks and that she was getting ready to release them and they were going to have a big announcement. And I want you to understand, I like Pam Bondi. I love what the administration is doing, but I was skeptical about that. It's like, what are we really going to see? And very often these things turn out to be what people call nothing burgers. And I thought, man, I wonder if they're going to release anything new. Are we going to actually see anything new? Like the big one everybody's looking for is the Epstein client list. And I thought, are we really going to see that? Are they really going to release that? I was hopeful that they were, but I was skeptical. And then this event happened. If you haven't seen it, I'll describe it for you. They invited, I think it was 11 influencers to come to the White House. These are people who have big platforms. One of them is a guy that I follow on X all the time. He goes by DC Drano. He's a DC lawyer, seems like a really good guy. He's one of the guys that is first on everything. He was invited, a whole bunch of other influencers. They brought him into the White House. They sort of, I don't want to say wined and dined him, but they introduced him to a whole bunch of great people. They met JD Vance, they met the president, they met Pam Bondi, they met Marco Rubio, a whole bunch of great people, and they presented them with binders. And if you're following the news, you've probably seen this. The binders said this was the Epstein file release, and they were told not to say anything about it until after the entire contents of the binder had been put up on the DOJ's website by Bondi. And so they left. They did these photo ops, and then they left, and they went home. And it turns out in those binders was basically nothing. It's basically everything that had already been released to the public. I think there was, as far as I've seen, one additional item, which was an evidence list that people hadn't seen before, an evidence list from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. That's Epstein's partner in crime on all this stuff. I think there are a lot of partners in crime, but she's the only one that's been prosecuted. But it was, I want to say, a staged photo op. And I think these influencers, I don't criticize them. They didn't know what they had been called to the White House for. They were just invited to the White House. I think this was a bad PR stunt and a ploy to get for a photo op. And I feel bad actually for some of these influencers who probably when they were handed those binders thought they were going to actually see something and be able to distribute it. Now, I'm not one of those people that objects to the idea that they brought influencers in to give them this stuff. I want you to think about the Twitter files and how effective it was that they brought in some influencers, gave them access to those files, let those people distribute it. I think it worked. It worked really well. And so I think those influencers, when they went to the White House, first of all, they had no idea what they're invited for. And second of all, when they were handed those binders, they didn't know that it was going to be a nothing burger. So I think they got used. I don't know who designed this PR stunt, but I think it was a bad idea. We now know that Pam Bondi claims that the Southern District of New York court is holding most of the evidence, and they're keeping it away from the FBI headquarters and Pam Bondi, Kash Patel. That's what we've been told. I don't know whether I believe that or not. I have no idea. I mean, I feel like if they're trying to hide the evidence and it's been sitting down there in the Southern District of New York, then likely it's been destroyed. I don't know that we're ever going to find any of that evidence. I think if there's a major cover up, they're going to have done everything they can by now, a long time after the case, to have destroyed as much of the evidence as they possibly can. Attorney General Bondi demanded these files be delivered to her. I haven't heard any news that these files that were allegedly in the Southern District of New York have been delivered to her. So I don't know what's going to happen with this. I just think this was terribly mishandled by the White House, terribly mishandled by Attorney General Bondi, terribly mishandled just generally as a PR stunt. Now, some people are going to get mad about this because I'm saying this, because I'm a conservative. I'm supposed to support the administration. But look, I'm going to always call balls and strikes. My loyalty, my main loyalty, if there is a loyalty test here, is to you. And in order to maintain my loyalty to you and what I think is my integrity, is that I have to call balls and strikes. And so while I'm generally supportive of the administration and I really like what they're doing, I like a lot of the stuff, the majority of the stuff that I'm seeing. And it doesn't mean I'm going to criticize absolutely every little thing I see that I don't like. But when they make a major misstep like this, I am going to comment on that. I mean, for me, it's not just about my own integrity. It's not just about my relationship with you. Those things are super important. But it's also, in my opinion, it's our obligation as the public, your obligation as much as mine, to help the administration stay on track. And we do that by when we see something we really don't like, even it's on somebody we might consider on our side, then we say that and we're open about that, because I think that's our feedback helps keep them on track. I think that's what we should all do, not just go along. If you just go along, you just use the herd mentality, I'm going to celebrate everything the administration does no matter what, because I support the administration generally. I feel like then you become like the crazy folks on the left who do that, who aren't living in reality. They'll support anything. They'll pretend Joe Biden is mentally competent when he's clearly a vegetable. They'll support Eric Swalwell when he's busted for sleeping with spies and all that stuff. They'll support anybody because they have a D in front of their name, doing anything because they have a D in front of their name. I think you, and I trust that you are, should be a rational skeptic. So that's our battle cry for the week, but it also points to this particular story. I was skeptical, and then I really don't like what happened. I don't like how that came down. I think there's going to be fallout from that. I'm sure we'll get past it. It's a blip on the radar, but it's important to note these kinds of things when they happen. And there's a lot of stuff happening. It's hard to keep track. You know, you had all these influencers at the White House, but we had a bunch of major guests at the White House this week. We had British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We had Ukrainian President Zelensky. We had French President Macron. I'm sure there were other people at the White House, but those are kind of the major international visits. Let's start with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, he was there, and I thought there was kind of a humorous exchange when he and the President Trump sat in front of the press, and they asked, you know, he was trying to avoid sanctions. How'd he do? And President Trump said, oh, he worked really hard at it. He earned all the money, whatever you guys pay him, he earned it working at it. And then Trump went on to positively say, I think we're going to get a deal. I like that. Like, some people don't like it. Trump says one thing when the person's not sitting there. He says another thing when they are. He's negotiating the whole time, right? He's posturing. He's setting things up so he can get a win. And he was very nice to Keir Starmer face to face. Now, one person that wasn't entirely nice to Keir Starmer was J.D. Vance, who actually called out Keir Starmer for a lack of freedom of the press in the UK. And Starmer said that they have freedom of the press. J.D. Vance, of course, disagreed. Who do you think is right? You know, their idea of freedom of the press and freedom of the speech, it actually goes beyond that in the UK right now to freedom of thought, is that you are allowed to say anything you want, think anything you want, pray anything you want, unless they say you can't. In other words, freedom of speech until they curtail your freedom of speech. So when Keir Starmer protests and says, no, we have freedom of speech in the UK, no, they don't. People are going to jail. The cops are banging on their doors and taking them away to jail for things they post on Facebook, things they post on Instagram, things they post on X that are not criminal other than they don't like what you're saying. So they don't have freedom of speech in the UK. And I think it's super dangerous. And I think that the West, in Western Europe, especially, is sliding in this direction. It's sliding away from free speech. We ought to be very careful about it. So it seems like I'm going to give Keir Starmer, for his performance at the White House, maybe a B. I'm going to give him the B because he was very good, at least his rhetoric on defense. And he said that the UK and the rest of Europe had to do a better job on defense. They had to spend more money on defense. Trump's asked him to go to 5% of GDP. Starmer has agreed to go from 2 to 2.5%. I think it's a little too little, a little too late. He says they're going to do that in 2027. So that's 0.2%. They're going to do that 2 years from now. So that seemed kind of weak to me, but at least he acknowledged that the UK has to step and do more along with the rest of Europe. They have to provide for their own weapons. They have to provide their own strategies. They have to put the money into the fight. So that rhetoric, I would say, was correct. Whether it's followed up with any action, yeah, I have my doubts about that. And we ought to continue to press them on free speech. All right, then we had French President Macron. I think he was actually first. Actually, I'm a little embarrassed to say this. I think he probably did the best job at the White House. And by that, I think he understands that he has no leverage with President Trump, and he didn't seem to try to exert any leverage on President Trump. And it just seemed like they had a pretty cordial meeting. And again, I think they're working out some trade deals right now, but it just seemed friendlier, or maybe the friendliest of the three meetings with international leaders at the White House. So again, I would say this is a weird week for me because I'm giving kudos to Macron. And hopefully Macron will be out of there soon and we'll get a more reasonable leader in France that reflects the more conservative tone of the French people at this point. But I don't know. We'll see. All right. Finally, on Friday, President Zelensky from Ukraine had a meeting with President Trump and with Vice President J.D. Vance. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but in front of the press, it was pretty ugly. I mean, there was an open argument going between the president and the vice president and President Zelensky in front of the press. And Trump was talking over Zelensky and shutting him down. Zelensky was saying that we're going to feel the bad stuff from Russia here before long, and we don't understand. And Trump pushed back and pushed back hard. So did J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance said, I haven't heard you say thank you to the American people one time since you're here. If you watch the body language of Zelensky, he was sitting there, arms crossed. He's wearing like a black turtleneck and black pants. I mean, he looks like some kind of Bond villain is the best way I would describe it. I hate to say that. Look, there's a lot of things. I don't think that Ukraine was the aggressor in this situation. There's a lot of things to say for Zelensky being brave in the face of war against him. And I do think Russia was the aggressor. I don't like how Trump has only painted Zelensky as a dictator. Is Zelensky a dictator? I would say, look, I don't like the fact that he had a 5-year term and he's now in his 6th year and he suspended elections. I think you can have elections during a war. Lots of countries have done it. He chose not to do it. I don't like that. Does that make him a dictator? I mean, I think at this point you could argue that term, but Putin's a dictator. Like, we all know Putin's a dictator, and Trump won't say Putin's a dictator because he's trying to play nice with Putin so he can negotiate effectively with him. And Trump knows how to play these things. People get all bent out of shape. Who's he calling a dictator? Who's he not calling a dictator? I don't worry about that kind of stuff. I look for results, not rhetoric. But I do think that the Ukrainian president was making a mistake by being hostile during a press conference. I just don't think that was a good look for him, and I don't think it's going to go well. I hope it went better behind the scenes, because I think Trump needs or should want the cooperation of all the parties in order to get a deal done in Ukraine, to stop the war, to stop the killing. And I think we are going to get such a deal, and I think there's going to be minerals to go along with it for the United States, and I think that's a really good thing. This is an interesting one. The White House has now taken control of who gets access to the president. By access, I mean, and this is important we understand, we define this, there's a White House press corps organization, and all the journalists are required to belong to it if they want to be in the White House and cover the president. And this has been this, like, I don't know how to call it, a club, a fraternal organization that's controlled who has the closest access to the president. It's been controlled by this organization for like 100 years. I don't know how long they've been around, but a long time. And it's the old guard. It's not entirely liberal. Fox is in there. Other than that, it's pretty liberal. And Fox, I think we can have our questions about Fox at this point, but they get to decide who gets to be in the Oval Office, who gets to be in the press room, who has to have the feed from outside, right? Who gets to travel on Air Force One. And the president and the White House said, yeah, we're not going to do it that way anymore. There's a bunch of new media influencers. We want to bring them in. Media has changed a lot in the last 100 years. Caroline Leavitt said that. It's not what it was 100 years ago. And so we're going to take charge of it. We, meaning the White House, we're going to decide who gets to be in the Oval Office. We're going to decide who gets to be in the press room. We're going to decide who rides on the plane. And the left goes crazy. Like, they completely flip out on this. It's a violation of the First Amendment. Yeah, no, it's not. And the court said it wasn't. It was not a difficult decision. They are not preventing any of these agencies from covering the president. It's just there's a limited amount of space in an intimate circumstance with the president. They're going to decide who gets in there. Everybody else can still cover the president. There's nothing that prevents them from covering the president. Everything that's done in the Oval Office goes out on the feed, so they get to see it. They just don't necessarily get to be there asking questions inside like that. And I think that's fine. Not everybody is entitled to every minute of the president's time. And this president is unbelievably available. Well over 1,000 questions answered in his first 3 weeks, where Biden didn't answer anywhere even close to that in his entire 4 years. So he is setting records for his accessibility to the press. This whole administration is as accessible and transparent as I've ever seen. So people are freaking out. It's a violation of the First Amendment, blah, blah, blah. It's not. And I'm glad that the White House has taken control of that, because they have, and they've done a really good job. And we're going to see changes in there. And I think you're going to see good changes in there. You're going to see new voices, new faces, new media. That means better and more unfiltered information for all of us. I don't want to talk about what's happening in COS this week. And I got to be honest with you, I had to have producer G write all this stuff down. There's so much going on right now. And I was traveling all week. This week I was started the week in Dallas, flew home the next morning, was in Austin in the morning. In the afternoon, I flew to Omaha. From Omaha, I grabbed a car, drove to Lincoln, Nebraska. In Lincoln, Nebraska, I testified in Lincoln, Nebraska. That was for removing the sunset clause. They haven't voted. I'm pretty sure we have the votes there. It was a great hearing, relatively contentious. The Eagle Forum, they're so out of control, as they are in most states we go. They slander us. Instead of engaging in the arguments, they attack me personally. They attack Patty personally. There's all kinds of criticism because we get paid to do what we do full time. That's actually my job. Surprise, surprise. All that's disclosed on what are called our 990s every year, but they attacked us for that. They said that I say Patty works from our kitchen table, and then they mentioned that she gets paid. First of all, I never said Patty works from the kitchen table. I just want to be perfectly direct. I make a joke and I say people accuse us of being a big fancy organization with high-rise offices. Patty used to have an office above our garage. We called that the high-rise office. But, Patty and I, when I'm home, we like to be close to each other. She moved in from the office outside the garage and moved into the spare bedroom next door. So no high-rise office. But I'm going to be honest, she does not work at the kitchen table. I do quite a bit, actually. Take my iPad out there because I like to move around. But no, she works in her office right next door. I think she likes to shut the door so me and the dogs who are passed out in the background here, we don't bug her. But yeah, she's in the office next door. So why Eagle Forum does this, and this is a woman by the name of Kathy Wilmot, and it's just slanderous. She accuses us of taking money from the Koch brothers. I'm not aware we've ever had any money from the Koch brothers, but man, if you got checks, lay them on me. We're happy. We're not going to do your bidding. We're going to continue to do our work. This is the kind of stuff they say in legislatures. This is why I'm just going to say it straight up. The John Birch Society, Eagle Forum, and Concerned Women for America right now, they go into these legislatures, they attack, they slander, they abuse. Mostly, and I'm going to be fair, I'm going to say less from Concerned Women, and I'm not sure I've even seen them be slanderous. They're just against us. But John Birch Society, Eagle Forum, just slander, viciousness, the techniques of the left. And this week we had something super interesting. Maybe producer G has a clip of this for you. I'm putting him on the spot here. But we actually heard Democrats, big D Democrats in Kansas quoting the John Birch Society why they're against us. Like, this is absolutely incredible. You now have this perfect alignment like this between the John Birch Society and Eagle Forum and Concerned Women of America stating the same positions and being quoted by Democrats who all oppose, or almost all in those states, oppose convention of states. By the way, I want to be really clear. Great Democrat sponsors in Hawaii. We have Democrats on our side that helped us get out of committee in Massachusetts. We have Democrats all across the country that support us. But in some states like Kansas, we'll have almost every Democrat votes against us. And they're colluding with the John Birch Society. They're actually using John Birch Society talking points. So if you run into one of these people from John Birch or Eagle Forum or Concerned Women for America, you got to ask them, like, does it bother you that you're on the same side as ACLU, Common Cause, George Soros, Planned Parenthood, La Raza, MoveOn.org? Because all of those organizations are testifying against us. And we're now I'm seeing this. I just saw this in Nebraska. Common Cause sends their lobbyists. Common Cause, George Soros' number one organization, sends their lobbyists to testify against us. And it's like you got Common Cause, and then you got Kathy Wilmot from Eagle Forum, like back to back, saying the same things. And yet you got Kathy Wilmot and Eagle Forum pretending that they're not standing with Common Cause. It makes absolutely no sense. Producer G, if we have any of that footage, I would love it.
As mentioned yesterday, the John Birch Society indicates an Article 5 convention is not the mechanism to take back and rein in our federal government. Instead, it's the principal vehicle to hijack and destroy our republic.
Also, producer G's made a great video asking those groups why they're standing with the leftists on this issue.
For the record, I represent the John Birch Society in opposition of this, so I want to put that out.
Why are some conservatives on the fringe standing with Soros-funded organizations? as the John Birch Society, the Eagle Forum, the ACLU, and the AFL-CIO actively oppose the idea of an Article 5 constitutional convention.
Most Americans agree we must use the tools the founders gave us to rein in federal tyranny, including Article 5 and Convention of States. We're over halfway to the constitutional threshold of 34 states and driving a stake through the heart of the federal Leviathan. We're going to get there eventually, but it would be going a whole lot faster without the opposition of those who should be our allies. A coalition of 250 Soros-funded groups regularly sends lobbyists into legislatures to spread fear about Convention of States. That part isn't surprising. After all, we're a direct threat to centralized power. But what is strange is some on the fringe show up at these hearings to parrot those same talking points, most notably lobbyists from the John Birch Society and Eagle Forum. How can the JBS be comfortable with standing on the same side as Soros-funded lobbyists? They are preserving the status quo in DC. It's just weird. JBS and Eagle Forum need to answer this simple question. Are you with us, or are you with them? Let us know where you stand in the comments below. And if you want to learn more, go to www.conventionofstates.com/facts.
Kind of this week, let's see, we had me in Nebraska. We had the Wyoming House Committee held a hearing. They advanced COS 6-3. We haven't had the House vote yet. In Wyoming right now, what we got is John Birch Society folks who listen to the John Birch Society in the leadership not letting us get a vote. This is some of the most despicable stuff to me. It disgusts me. It makes me really angry. We're on the calendar for the floor, and every day they do the calendar, and then they just push us back to the bottom. And so, look, this is so despicable and so gutless. And these are quote unquote Republicans, right? Acting like tyrants, acting like kings. We made it out of the committee. We made it to the floor. If you want to defeat us in a vote, if you want to have a debate, let's do it. Defeat us. It's happened before. I can take those lashes. That's fine. But this gutless maneuver of not letting us go to the floor, we had this in Arizona for years in the Senate there. And Andy Biggs was the Senate president, and he wouldn't let us come out of into a vote on the floor. He did what's called a desk veto. That's what's going on in Wyoming. It's disgusting and despicable. As soon as Biggs went to Congress, we got passed in Arizona a lot of years ago. I think the same thing will happen in Wyoming, but right now they're not letting us come to a vote. So that was a 6-3 House vote in the committee. And then on Wednesday in Iowa, the House state government voted 13-10 to advance COS to the House floor. I'm pretty excited about that. We're waiting on the Senate committee right now to vote on a companion resolution, but we're onto the House floor in Iowa. I explained the Nebraska committee hearing, good hearing, contentious hearing. We're going to get that vote. They vote at a later date, I think, in what's called exec committee. We might not know exactly what the vote is. On Thursday in Rhode Island, we had a hearing. I love hearing that, right? Rhode Island, Eastern Seaboard had a great hearing. Kudos to the team there. They did an especially great job. To our regional director, Haley Shaw, fantastic job. We haven't had a vote there yet, but I'm hopeful there in Rhode Island. And then Thursday in the Kansas Senate, we had a debate on the floor. Kansas has this weird thing where you have to have a 2/3 vote. That's unconstitutional. It's being litigated right now, but we passed the 2/3 threshold. Super proud of our Kansas folks. It was 29-11. We got 2 more votes than we needed. Getting that 2/3 almost impossible. So that's done there. Now it needs to go through the House. Need 2/3 in the House right now. Again, that's unconstitutional, but that is in court right now in Kansas. So that's the first time ever we've passed the 2/3 threshold. Remember hearing me talk about incremental progress? That's incremental progress, and you got to celebrate that every time. Also this week what day was it? Thursday. Can't keep track of my days. I was in Georgia for their Capitol Day, their Surge Day. It was fantastic. I think we had 35 folks there. We had pizza, packed the room, traveled all over the legislature, talked to legislators, lots of support there. Now, we already passed in Georgia. They were the first state. They were number one. They have a special place in my heart. They'll always be number one. And so what are you doing there? Why are we there? Because there's lots of other stuff that COS activists work on. There were multiple bills. They were working on 3 different bills. One was called SB1. It's the Riley Gaines bill. We love Riley Gaines, good friend. And Riley was there by video talking about this bill. It's to keep boys out of girls' sports. Doesn't seem like it should be that difficult or contentious. We'll see if that gets across the finish line. There are a couple other bills they were working on while we were there. One of them is to allow kids out of schools to study the Bible for an hour once a week. And that is, by the way, the Constitution allows that according to the Supreme Court in the 1950s. Some local districts don't like making that happen. So they're passing a law there saying that districts must allow that to happen. That is the constitutional standard. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's with an organization running sort of that all over the country called LifeWise, good friends of ours. Really proud of those guys for doing it there. I'm going to help them out everywhere I possibly can. So that was going on in Georgia. I got to see a bunch of old friends, make a bunch of new friends. I think we got a bunch of video we posted up on our website about that. So great job to the Georgia team. Also our regional director there, Jonathan Viad. Got to see Jonathan while I was there. Always fun to do that. That's a lot of stuff. It's been a crazy busy week, not just for me, but all for COS. Next week, we have the Maryland 34 Ready hearing. 34 Ready is the legislation that we propose in these legislatures that our grassroots support, tell people get ready to be at that 34 state threshold. It's delegate selection acts. It's delegate acts to keep them in line when they go to convention. They get out of line, it usually imposes criminal penalties. I don't know exactly what the legislation in Maryland says, but that's the 34 Ready hearing there. That's March 11th. And then March 12th, there's an Ohio Senate hearing with Rick Santorum. March 12th is the Arkansas Capitol Day. March 12th is the Connecticut Capitol Day. Man, a lot going on. March 13th is the Kentucky Capitol Day. March 14th is the Vermont Capitol Day. Is there enough going on? My head's spinning. If you want to know what's going on in COS, go to our website. Make sure you get signed up, conventionofstates.com. This is super important stuff for you to be involved in and for you to be up to date on. I can bring you everything I can, but you'll get more information on our website. We want you to make sure you help promote this. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share with a friend. You should do that all the time, as many times as you possibly can. Now you really only have to do it once, but get your friends to do it. There are a lot of new items at the Convention of States store, so go to shopconventionofstates.com. We've got new Live Free or Die tumblers, new Welcome to the Golden Age t-shirts. Probably show those off to you next week. I've got them both here in the house. Also, we have an open letter to Trump asking President Trump to support Convention of States publicly. We just need him to tweet about it, post on Truth Social, forward that to X. And so if you go to conventionofstates.com/Trump, you can sign our petition. We'll end up getting that to Trump. And if you want to ask me a question, I do my best to answer them. And you go to conventionofstates.com/askmark. I pretty much answer all of them. So we're going to jump right into those. Michael Konigsberg asks, who has to pay for the convention costs, commissioner expenses, etc.? That's not specified, Michael. We're talking about whether we want Congress to pay for that and maybe put this in an appropriations bill. I've been talking to a couple of congressmen. I think the states should just divide the cost per capita based on population of the state. That my guess is that's most likely what will happen is they'll just divide it on a per capita basis. But there is nothing specified in the Constitution. So there's going to have to be a meeting hall. There's going to have to be technology, security, all of this stuff. And so I think each state will probably pay pro rata expenses for the General Convention itself. Tracy Grabiak says, of the many executive orders and initiatives from President Trump, which one do you think could be converted into proposed amendments germane under the COS resolution? I've never thought about that, Tracy. And I don't know all of them offhand, so I want to be careful here. But one of the things that I think might be interesting is to make something like Doge constitutional, right? Is to create some kind of permanent, deep review process that's required of Congress, of the executive, of the federal government, largely writ, that requires them to do these constant, transparent reviews. I guess that's off the cuff. That's what I would say. Sort of make Doge permanent kind of thing. JBS, do you think that age limits count as term limits? Absolutely. And I think we probably ought to have those. I think we need those on Congress, I think, along with term limits. But I think it would be great to have an age limit. And look, I know there's always going to be people who go, yeah, well, look, but Chuck Grassley is sharp at 900 years old or however old he is. I don't care. I think at some point we should create a cap, maybe 80 years old, 82 years old. I don't know what it is. I'd be happy to look at actuarial tables that tell us, what's the average decline in intellect over time, obviously goes down. I have no idea, but I think we ought to look at that. And I do think, and the would and could and should count as some kind of term limits. I'm totally for that. All right, guys, that's all I got. I think I've gone overtime anyway. Thank you guys for tolerating me, tolerating the dogs. We appreciate having you here on the BattleCry. Until next week, God bless you guys. I appreciate you, and we will see you on the BattleCry.